What's up, folks? My name is Sir Medieval, and today I'll be bringing you some new details that arose in regards to Amazon's new upcoming game, New World. This comes from an interview done by an Italian website by the name of MMO.IT that features a player by the name of Alphano, who goes into a good amount of detail about the current experience of the sandbox. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the interview begins by giving a little bit of a baseline to the New World. It describes New World as a sandbox with a taste of the survival aspect. The description goes as follows. It starts without any introduction or gall, and the player is encouraged to explore only by his own curiosity. And of course, the initial impression that a lot of people had is that the New World is nothing but the 50th survival game that no one wants anymore. But nay, says Alphano. Now let's find out why. The appearance, however, deceives, he says. The first indication that this is not a survival game has to do with when you attack a player. You need to activate criminal status before you can engage in combat. When you attack someone, you'll be flagged for 3 hours, where anyone can kill you without penalty, as well as the loss of all of your items upon death. You lose your items upon death anyway, by the way, flagging or not. The only difference is, if you're not a criminal, you only lose your inventory, but everything you have on you stays there, like your equipment. The interview goes on to talk about how on the map there are several outposts where non-criminal players are invulnerable. You can sell and store items safely, so this is not a survival game, Alphano says, but a PvP game with rules reminiscent of old school MMOs like Ultima. The deposits, or banks, in these outposts are not global, but local, so players would have to transport resources from one bank to the next. One thing he also describes being in the game are checkpoints. At the cost of a precise amount of gold, any guild can take possession of land and start building on it. In a certain circular region starting from the center of this land and moving outwards, the structures created near it are invulnerable for a certain amount of time, specifically about 24 hours. And yeah, this is actually starting to sound not just a lot like, but very much like games like Darkfall. New World is therefore a massive game of conquest, a war simulator if we want, like many PvP MMOs in the past, with the most advanced technology of the moment to support the highest possible number of players per server. And at the moment, nearly 600 people per server, but with Amazon's cloud support, the developers promise to reach 10,000. I wanted to stop here to touch up on something that's already said and is in the next post as well. In the next part of the interview, Alphano begins to talk about how New World is by no means a survival sandbox as many might seem. That this is in effect an MMORPG based on territorial conquest, and how most of the concepts are not innovative in themselves, but if this were 2010, nobody would call it a survival game. And I'd say that's up for debate because, I mean, I don't know about that, but you could say any game that not only enables you to some degree, but requires you to drink and defend yourself against the outside world around you could be called a survival game. And sure, it may not kill you to refrain from eating or drinking the whole time, but if it prevents you from regenerating health and stamina like it does in New World, then I'm pretty sure at the first sign of trouble, you will be experiencing a most painful and untimely death. I'd call that a survival for sure, not to mention full loot. You could say it definitely has MMORPG aspects, not discounting the character progression that's in there via skills and leveling, or the other mechanics of the game that contribute to that tag. But overall, in my opinion, with the mechanics that come from games like Mortal Online, Darkfall, etc., and the full loot / survival aspect, alongside with this being a game you could have the freedom to do quite a bit that you set your mind to, I'd label it as an MMO survival sandbox, if anything, not an MMORPG sandbox. But maybe when it gains more of those features of the MMORPG element, it could safely be labeled as such. Things like dungeons, raids, and more importantly, actually having a semi or full-fledged questing and storyline, something most tend to forget about. After reading through their website, watching some videos, and going through the rest of this interview, it's great to see that they might be planning on going for a Trinity system. When they start to add in other elements as well that you'd usually find in an MMORPG, it can definitely be labeled as one. But for now, it seems the best way to describe it would be as an MMO survival sandbox. The interview continues to talk about the building system, which goes into detail about what is available for placement after a territory is conquered. Houses, walls, wells, storage, fields to cultivate, etc. Mob density is pretty sparse and could use some improvement. You can create up to 4 characters per server in the alpha, but only about 1 will be in release, still to be determined in terms of characters. Although at night, the respawn rate for things like skeletons is increased and more easily visible. The combat is what Alphano compares heavily to Dark Souls. You have more in your toolkit besides your basic attack, and multiple weapons to use for that purpose too. In terms of progression, you want to make sure that you specialize, whether it's combat based or gathering. The game seemingly runs really decent as well from what Alphano says. He's playing at the moment with the 1070 and hasn't dropped below 60 frames, which I'm not sure if most people would say is good, but hopefully it's working for the majority of the testers though. Server size at the moment rests at about 600 like we went into before, but Amazon wants to extend that up to 10,000 according to their promise. Which I have to say is giving some mad dark and light vibes. I mean, they wanted to have 10,000 players in a server too, but we can give Amazon massive ups for at least reaching 600. From the sound of it, it seems like he has yet to experience mass PvP to see if it's laggy or not. He compared Darkfall to having 200 to 300 sieges, albeit not extremely fluently, which is true, and AlphaNo expects that New World will be able to do that as well. Last thing the interview goes into is about a release date. At the moment, it seems that Amazon's New World won't see release until about 2020. A 2019 release is possible, but it's not something you want to hold as gospel. We'll see what happens in that regard, basically. But for now, that's all the information that we have available from AlphaNo's New World experience, folks. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful night or day. I'll see you next time, and farewell.